The AWARE Project's aim is to balance the public conversation about psychedelics, spread accurate information, and give a new face to psychedelia. We feel that this change will occur through connection and relationship, one individual at a time. We are calling on everyone whose lives have been improved through the mindful use of psychedelics to educate themselves and become ambassadors for the psychedelic experience. Show those around you that people who use psychedelics mindfully cross all social, racial, economic, and political boundaries.
So why are we here today? So today is 9/20, which this is the second year of the 9/20 Coalition, which was started by a group of people on the East Coast to gather different event organizers that do events like these all over the world to focus on psilocybin research, psilocybin as a medicine. So last year we did an event on 9/20, and here we are again. So we're kind of in collaboration with people and events and groups all over the world. So you can find out more on 920coalition.org. But yeah, so the AWARE Project is a proud part of that group. So it's nice to be part of this bigger global community. All right, so Sherree. Many of you may know her. She's been my partner in starting the inner space integration program. Do you want to say a couple words about that and then roll into an introduction? So this is Sherree. She's amazing.
Hi, everybody. I always feel terribly exposed standing up here, so forgive me. First of all, thank you so much for Ashley, the incredible Ashley Booth, for just putting this incredible Los Angeles community together. Thank you so much. I think she deserves another big applause. About a year into founding AWARE Project, Ashley and I kind of started talking about a possible sister organization for AWARE. We basically started recognizing a need in the community for integration services and preparation services for psychedelic experiences. So we started Inner Space Integration, which offers a non-judgmental, supportive, non-pathologizing, emotional space for people who have questions about psychedelic experiences, either past or future. And we hold group meetings right now, currently in Santa Monica, on a monthly basis. They're on a drop-in, donation-based. Plus, we have monthly intensive groups that we hold that kind of offer more intense integration experience. And if anyone wants more information about that, you can come speak to me or Ashley, or go on Facebook, find us, or on our website, innerspaceintegration.com. And it's going really great, and if you know anyone that does need support with psychedelic experiences, we're here to help. So please keep us in mind. Thank you. In Space Integration, actually, when we started kind of putting it together, I actually was just completing my master's thesis, which was just a few months ago, on the topic of psychedelic integration therapy for facilitation of personal growth as catalyzed by the psychedelic experience. And Dr. David Tripp, who is our speaker tonight, our guest speaker tonight, was one of my advisors for this process. And I would like to, is it okay if I tell them how we found you? So when I started graduate school a couple of years ago, I went to my department head, my psychology department head at Antioch University. I told him, listen, I'm really into psychedelics. I think there should be a psychedelic class presented in our school because psychedelics have a lot to do with mental health and obviously psychology. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, we actually have someone doing that already. Let me connect you with Dr. David Tripp. Now, Dr. Tripp is actually, that is his real name, to anyone who might be wondering. And of course, I tried to get an appointment with him ASAP and just meet this other ally that I just heard of. And after stepping out of a 90-minute meeting, I was like, holy beans, did I really just have a 90-minute conversation with a professor in this university about microdosing mushrooms? And that was the truth, that's what happened. And it was the most incredible feeling to just discover that in an academic environment, and for me personally, very affirming in my experience. And a little bit about Dr. David Tripp. He has a PhD in social ethics. He is a founding member of All Saints AIDS Service Center in the mid-'80s, where he served as a support group facilitator and an editor of the monthly AIDS journal Asclepios. In 1999, he created Bridge, which is a humanities-focused program. Do we have people from Bridge here today? Yes. That offers free college-level education to underprivileged people living in Los Angeles. And I know that it's been going now for almost 20 years, so, right?
Yeah.
And also he's been teaching at Antioch University since 1989, and he's currently teaching these following courses. Divine Madness. The Politics of Psychology. Foucault. Queer Theory. And my absolute favorite, and where I learned a lot about psychedelics research, Psychedelics Revision, The Cultural Politics of Consciousness. And with that, I would like to please invite Dr. David Tripp.
Thank you, everyone who can't really see, but thank you. I'm taller than when I sat down. Thanks. Just a generous group of human beings, right? And so many people doing so much interesting work at a time that I think of as a psychedelic renaissance in history. And I often use the image of a big, oh, really, thank you. To describe the psychedelic community, which is sort of a stretch of a metaphor already, as just this giant circus. And I don't really know a community that is diverse in that particular way, right? So you've got doctors and academics and researchers and ordinary people and therapists and kids who just want to have fun and burners and all of them under this one giant tent. And it's just brilliant. I think we need all of us during the time of Renaissance. So I'm happy to be here, have an opportunity to talk to this white light, which usually happens to me in other circumstances, but we'll pretend everything is okay. So one thing to know is, so I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a medical researcher, and there are just incredible people doing lots of important work in those areas. If I have an area, I suppose it's more philosophy and cultural criticism, and I speak to you in that role this evening. I have a long relationship with psychedelics, as I'm sure many of you in this room do. And because of my interest in philosophy and cultural criticism, I've thought a lot about them in a variety of ways. And so I just want to share this evening, for a few minutes, some of what I've been thinking about. And then, more interestingly, we'll get your questions, and we'll have some dialogue. So, one thing though, a quick rundown. On the current research, in case you don't know, I assume most people in the room do. These are some of the things that either are going on right now or have been going on very recently. So there's folks looking into the uses, the value of psilocybin for end-of-life existential crises, which, take a beat and put yourself there, right? And so Grob out at UCLA, who does so much good work, he's involved in that. The Hefner Research Institute in Santa Fe is doing work in that and has some great videos. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, people are doing some research in that area over at University of Arizona. Cluster headaches, also known as suicide headaches, and to my knowledge, no one's doing research right now, but there's an organization called Cluster Busters, which accumulates a great deal of anecdotal information and knowledge and wisdom for people who suffer from that. And the results seem to be absolutely amazing. Tobacco addiction, I'm sure no one in here has ever struggled with tobacco addiction. Johns Hopkins University, they're doing some work there. Alcohol addiction at the University of New Mexico. Depression at Imperial College in London. PTSD and psilocybin at the University of South Florida. And then the research that came out a couple of years ago now, showing the growth of new brain cells and the establishment of new neural pathways. Then that's been happening at the University of South Florida. And that's just amazing. And I think it's an important part of my own story, especially the neural pathway. I'll never be able to prove it, but I think it is. You know, we didn't know that adults could grow new brain cells and form new neural pathways, but now we have evidence that teaches us otherwise. So those are all the things I'm not going to talk to you about. Instead, you know, when I think about mushrooms, and then there's certainly been articulate philosophers throughout the years. Everyone loves Terence McKenna and our dear, dear Timothy Leary, and so many others. But something that hasn't been looked at, it seems to me, or at least as careful, I need more conversation partners, there's a better way of putting it, is about the values. Like what do we learn from, you know, what do we bring back? How does this change us or transform us, if it does? I mean, sure, it's a great time, and the colors are pretty. And, you know, so there's, at an experiential level, and I'm all in favor of experience. Get as much of it as you can, because we're not here very long. So, yay. But is that it, right? And we hear language of, well, it transformed my life. Brilliant, how? Right? So what does that look like? And so I was doing some poking around on Arrowhead, contributed to Arrowhead, and other places, just looking at Tripp reports on psilocybin, on mushrooms. And these are the words that popped up over and over and over and over and over again. I don't think I'll read them all, but like openness, healing, mystical, patterns, oneness with all, heart opening, unity, happiness, strangely familiar. Connection, light, insight, joy, earth, presence, love, teacher, beauty, wisdom, colors, ineffable, waves, and the slowing of time. And so we hear very similar things come back to us quite a bit. And often in trying to talk to people about our own experiences, we're using a lot of this kind of language. So that gets me to thinking, well, what the hell? Which is what I spend most of my time thinking, frankly. And there's a guy who I'm happy to intone his name because it doesn't seem many Americans are that familiar with his work. But Patrick Lundberg, anybody know Patrick and his, yeah. So read Patrick. He died, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. And his real claim to fame was on psychedelic music. Nobody who ever lived knew more about psychedelic music than Patrick Lundberg. but he also thought about other things. And in his last book, he was talking about a challenge that he wanted to put out. And the challenge was for us to begin to understand psychedelics on their own terms. Not importing other discourses to explain psychedelics, but just trying to meet them anew and afresh on their own terms. And what would that look like? And I'm going to quote you, very, very brief. He talks about, you know, what we've mostly done is tried to understand psychedelics through what's familiar to us. So we've tried to understand them through psychology, because we're psychological beings, we're 21st century beings. Psychology is the dominant discourse of our time. We think about ourselves, our lives, our relationships, social problems, everything through psychology. So let's understand psychedelics through psychology. Well, okay, that's undoubtedly a worthwhile undertaking. But what if we didn't? What if we just tried to understand psychedelics on their own terms? The other paradigm that we use is spirituality or religion. And I don't want to get into all the inter-Nicene debates between the spirituality and religion and all of that. I'll just say that I think religion is an attempt of a community to make sense out of their spiritual experience. I think that's where it begins. And that's a way to think about psychedelics. Sure, that's brilliant. You know, I had these spiritual experiences, mystic. That's fantastic. But what if we didn't? What if we just try to understand psychedelics as psychedelics? And Patrick says this. He says that what we've seen in trying to understand psychedelics for those two paradigms is what he calls a saga of a series of failed metaphors and a troubling lack of discussion regarding a psychedelic way of life. And I was so happy when I read those words because I thought, oh, I have a conversation partner from across the sea. That's going to be fantastic. And then he died, which has made communication much harder. But we're trying. So that's what I want to talk with you about in the time that I have left. I think we're doing okay. And what I'm about to say is, you know, an opinion, right? This is based on many years of experience, intimate, very intimate relationship with psychedelics, and in particular with the mushroom. I think of the mushroom as my teacher. I think of it as an extraordinarily significant relationship in my life. And I think of it as a relationship, not as something I use or something no, I'm in a relationship with a plant, with mycelium. And so it comes just from me thinking about that and me being in conversation with the people that I travel with, many of whom are here this evening. So, and then no doubt they will correct me when I misrepresent some of these ideas. And first and foremost, conversation with my favorite conversation partner, who is my life partner, Jennifer, who's here, who, to be able to engage in the depths of relationality and conversation with somebody about psychedelic experience is pretty extraordinary. So I'm a sucker for spatial metaphors. Like I think I'm a cartologist, or cartographer? Yes, I'm a cartographer. And so anything with maps and space and those kind of metaphors speak to me. So when I try to think about psychedelic values, and in particular, the values that I've learned from the mushroom, I think there are common psychedelic values for mushrooms, LSD, DMT, all of those things. But I think they all have their own personality as well. Your relationship is going to be very different, I think, with each of them. So when these values, while I'm calling them psychedelic values, for me, they're mushroom. They're both, whatever. So the first question I have when I start thinking about this is, well, what kind of space is psychedelic space? What is mushroom space? Because I know I enter a space, I pass through a portal if I were to ever use these substances, right? So I know that happens. And to me, the words that best define the space, first, I think of Alice telling us that things are curiouser and curiouser. We're not in Kansas anymore, to mix myths for a second, right? And so psychedelic space, a mushroom space, is a space, I believe, marked by alterity, or the otherwise, or queerness. I have a thing I like to do on queering psychedelics, but I can't do that tonight. But all of those ideas are connected: alterity, otherness, and queerness. The curiouser and curiouser-ness of it. And I think that those are values. I think that being in a space that I'm not home, how things well, I am home, but I'm not. It's the strangely familiar, right? But things are different here. I don't want to do this through me. I want me through this, right? I want to get out of the way of my own experience. So we all have interpretive structures, little things that we carry with us to help us understand the world, to move through the world efficiently, get crap done. We all have rent and mortgage and crap that we have, right? So we have those things. But this space invites us to set that down, because you're somewhere else. That's really, 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 really hard to do. But it can be done. And then that's a value that I believe you can bring back to your ordinary life. That you can begin to cultivate otherness, alterity, queerness, and one's own being, and one's own relationships in the, consensual reality place that we're in. And so the challenge with this first thing, what kind of space is it, is to get to know the space on its own terms. Not through what you're familiar with. If you experience, oh, I know what that, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't. Stop for a minute. Turn around 3 times. Look between your legs. And see what's there. Feel what's there. Right? Don't just, oh, I know what that is. And that's scary, can be scary, but it's that exquisite terror that we call beauty. So, yay. Right? So what kind of space in it? It's a space of alterity, the otherwise, queerness, and such things. Well, how is it otherwise is my second question. How is it otherwise? Like what's the experience of being in that space like? If it's so ulterior and otherwise. Well, this is where it gets fun. Among the ways I would describe this, and that I've heard it described in the conversations with my travel partners, is it's a place marked by multiplicity. I'm going to just read a few things and then unpack them a bit. Multiplicity, infinite possibilities. Alan Watts used to talk about purposeless play, bliss awareness, presence, nowness. So when you get into this place of the otherwise, what's there? Multiplicity. you're looking at one thing and I'm not looking at one thing, right? Any one thing is like an infinite number of things. And you start to see the infinite possibility. Oh, wow, I really am not, this is not Tulsa. Tulsa's not even in Kansas, David. Right? So multiplicity, infinite possibilities, the purposeless play, which so often we forget about. You know, dear Alan made such a big deal about the purposeless play. And, you know, to quit being a damn adult. You know, when we are adults, we've been co-opted, we've been compromised, we've had to make compromises in order to find our way. We are social beings, human beings, in societies, and we have to do all that stuff. Otherwise, we're prophets who live out in the boondocks and eat locusts like John the Baptist or something. And that's great, I guess, but you don't get really good food, and you probably don't get laid very often. And, you know, I don't know about the prophet thing. It's good for some people, but maybe not for all of us. But that comes with being an adult. And then what happens when we can set that down? And play because it's good for you. No, as Alan reminded us, without purpose, just play. Not because it's good for you. Not because there's a particular end associated with it. Just fucking play. Right? And it's extraordinary when we can be in that space again. We see differently. And what we bring back from our experience is something altogether different, I think. I don't know. Some people talk about bliss awareness, or presence, or nowness. I like made-up Germanic-sounding words like nowness. But that presence, right? The be here now, all of the stuff that people sit around and meditate and chant and do all of these things. But one of the brilliant things about psychedelics, and I think mushrooms in particular, it's a complex presentation, is I never can remember anything I've written, so I have to write it down. So the psychedelic philosophy offers us something that existing belief systems do not, which is the direct experience of another way of being, another world. And I think that that's part of the play thing. I think that's part of the being present. Like, you're not thinking about, oh, it could be different. It is different. For that time, and depending on what you've ingested, that time will vary, right? But for that time, you are somewhere. You are having the experience. That's very different than thinking about it. And, you know, all the other kinds of works we may do to try to be there. You are there. And those then all seem like values to me. The values of multiplicity and infinite possibility and presence and nowness and play and all of those things, and to live from these values. Not from, you know, Sherree was kind enough to mention some of the courses that I've taught over the years at Antioch, and especially the ones I'm teaching right now. The psychedelics course that I teach, the subtitle of the course is on the cultural politics of consciousness. You know, I think there's a war going on. I think there's been one going on for a long time about consciousness and how we live and the values that we choose to live by when they're informed by psychedelics help us develop a kind of consciousness which, frankly, is at odds with our social and political economy. They don't go together super well, which doesn't mean that they can't. I've seen people work really hard at doing that. But it's a shift in consciousness. And it's taking on a consciousness that we're not supposed to have. And our government still wants to lock people up for, and so on and so forth. So that's the second question I asked. And now we get to the third question, which I like even better. I like each question better. Well, what's going on in this space? So you've told me it's an otherwise, an alterity, and then you've told me, well, it's marked by these kinds of things, purposelessly and multiplicity and so on. What's actually going on in the place? Well, in a word, unfolding. Is participating in the unfolding, which is something that we don't get told about. We're told that things are as they are. One of the advantages of having lived a few decades is even without psychedelics, you learn, well, that's not true. Right. Right. That's like the biggest lie anybody's ever told. But that's what we're told. Things are what they are. When we learn, and psychedelics are such an amazing teacher in this regard, that no, everything is constantly already in the process of unfolding. And you get to participate in that. I'm not sure I want to. Because I kind of like my safe, secure, okay, fine, good luck with that. Or, you know, pull the plug on this drain and see what happens. So part of what this unfolding, and what does the unfolding smell like? Relationality, I think, is a key thing. That's what's going on in that space. Think of the metaphor, right? Mushrooms are genius because they're their own metaphor. So think of mushrooms as a metaphor, and it's mycelium. And you know, we eat the sex organs of the mycelium. Lucky us, right? But underground is the roots and the mycelia spreading. And what are they doing? They're interconnecting. The largest living organism on the planet, we are told, I haven't checked this out personally, but I've been told, is mushrooms, mycelium. And we've learned recently, there's been fascinating research that shows that mushrooms actually, mycelium allows plants to communicate to one another. Right, so, and then you're ingesting not just the actual mushroom, not just your teacher, a metaphor. And part of the metaphor is relationality. And relationality with one another in ways that just start to blow your mind. And then relationality with yourself in ways that I don't know anybody who has worked with mushrooms who hasn't spent a good deal of time just sobbing over that relationship with themselves. Right? This is okay. And then relationship with, to get grandiose about it, everything that ever existed. So if you don't like the R word, then think of it as connections. But I think that, you know, yay, we're connected. Yes, that's fantastic. I'm connected to a lot of things, you know, like Chase Bank. But I don't need a relationship with it. So this inter and intra-relationality, this connectedness. I'm thinking of an author who used to talk about the naked existence. What's going on? It's like naked existence. Beingness, isness. These are things going on. And I would round that list out with creation, motion, movement, and energy. So in answer to the question, what's going on in the otherwise space, with all of its multiplicity and infinite possibilities and nowness, relationality. You're being hooked up in ways that, honestly, there's nothing in our political economy, in our culture, in our society that tells us that this kind of relationality is possible. Nothing. And suddenly, it's just happening. And you're participating in that happening. And it's all happening with this energy that's flowing everywhere and through you in ways that sometimes you think you're having an epileptic fit. There's so much energy pulsing through your body. Do not, by the way, touch your iPod under such circumstances. I can bring one. I've made that mistake. Fried to, yeah. So, but also motion and movement. And, I don't know if I've done this or not. So, one of the most profound experiences, to give you one Tripp report, right, from Tripp, I think Tripp is allowed one, which took place in my bathroom, which was where most of my most significant experiences led. And whatever it was, whatever, people would say, it was God, whatever that thing is, this is what it was. I can demonstrate. And it wasn't me doing that with my hands, it was this thing, I have no idea what it was. It was energy, it was beyond every category that I've ever considered. And it was motion and energy. And so all of this is going on. And again, I think these are values. They're not just experiences. I think these are values that we bring back. I talk a lot about building a bridge to psychedelic space. I mean, if you want to just go and have a good time, go and have a good time. You want to do that for years? Do that for years. At some point, do some work, because you're with the greatest teacher that you'll ever be with. And what is the work? Well, paying attention to some of this kind of stuff. And all of you would have your own list of things. But also build a bridge so that you can bring that back, so that on your day-to-day quotidian life, you're connected to that space. And you're living out these values. It's the best way I know to build the bridge between the two. So those are 3. I have 4. Really good or sort of? Really good. Oh, brilliant. So the 4th question I have is, okay, so bridges, building bridges, whatever. So what can you bring back from this space? What are you going to have a few days out, a few weeks out, a few months out, a few years out, a few decades out? What's that going to, what manifest and can manifest in your life? And I want to be clear, this is all things that could be there and that could happen. Psychedelics are not, in my opinion, a silver bullet. You don't change without your will and participation. You're given opportunities beyond what you can imagine, but you've got to show up in some way. And I've known, and we've all known, lots of people. I have this saying, right? You go in and experience an asshole, you come out an asshole. Right? And it used to puzzle me. Like, how can you be taking this extraordinary medicine with everything it wants to give you, and you're still a dick? like what is that? But it happened, and again, I know we all have had that experience. What's going on here? And so it that's why I love the metaphor of relationship. You know, to be in relationship with the mushrooms. Because then that's a constant challenge to your assholeness. And it's asking something more of you, and it's calling you out, and it's all this stuff. That's why we do intimacy, right? Is because of who we can become when we will engage another being in that way. And to have that with a fungus. Oh yeah, so what can you bring back from this space? Well, I have 4 ideas, and I'll be interested in yours. The first thing I think one brings back from mushroom space in our endeavors to live a psychedelically informed life is blissful inadequacy. In English, failure. That's what you get, right? Blissful, and you are so inadequate, right? The words, right? And you know you are, because you are not filtering the experience through you. You've taken the heroic step of getting out of your own way and letting yourself be filtered through the experience, through the mushroom. Get out of the way of your own experience. And when you do that, you realize just how inadequate you are, which can be deeply troubling. You know, we live in a culture that loves the myth of adequacy, self-sufficiency, and we don't care that it's a myth, right? We know people are lying through their teeth, but we celebrate them in their adequacy. You know, and no, I'm not thinking about any particular at this particular moment. But the inadequacy isn't the crap that we grew up with, that you're not enough, that you're too stupid, you'll never amount to anything, you're not pretty, whatever that, I don't know what that's just toxic nastiness. This is an inadequacy that comes from recognizing how very small we are in relation to all that is, and how we are so clueless. And I love our bards, our psychedelic bards, who make up all kinds of stories about what's going on in psychedelic space. I could listen to them. I have listened to them for days at a time, and it's fantastic play. But they don't know. None of us know. That's got to be step 1. We don't fucking know. And we're okay with that, because that's the first step on a journey to something ulterior, queer and otherwise, curiouser and curiouser. So, what was that? Oh yeah, inadequacy. So, and I use the word failure. There's a guy, Jack Halberstam, who wrote one of my favorite books ever, called The Queer Art of Failure. And in that, he makes this genius case for failure and how important it is. And how for queers in the world, that's step 1, right? You're before you even have a good sense of self, you failed. So you are in the corners, by the way, facing the wrong direction, and you have to make your way. And no, there's no support. In fact, we'd rather not hear your voice, nor see your love, or your art, or your creativity. Genius place to begin. Let's go there with psychedelics, right? And to be willing to admit and to celebrate, frankly, that no, From the perspective of the consensual consciousness of our social political system, blah, 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 yeah, we suck. Because we don't buy the same values and won't live in the same way. Thank you very much. We're trying to do something else here. And all the good that has come from Enlightenment culture over the past couple hundred years, and lots and lots and lots of great things have happened, y'all have also pretty much driven us off a cliff. And we won't participate, right? So this blissful inadequacy, this failure, this not knowing. You know, my happiest moment as a teacher, frankly, is when a student asks me a question, and from, you know, my gut, I have no idea. Right? So let's play and figure this out. Let's get some good ideas cooking here. We are somewhere interesting now. If I know, it's a David show once again. Much better to be where I don't know. And the other thing that's attached to this not knowing, this blissful ignorance and inadequacy, I think is humor. All right? The sense of humor that comes with being, I'm just lost. I don't know. Well, isn't that terrifying? Well, yeah, it's, you know, terrifying, but it's also funny as hell. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, you know, it's you and me, and we've got to find our way out. Okay, this is gonna be good, right? So that's a value, it seems to me, is blissful inadequacy, which I think is followed by a second thing, which is humility. Once you know you're not the shit, humility in the face of everything. Absolutely, unconditionally, in the face of everything. I have a really good idea of who I am. And that's humility. I mean, how else am I going to respond to psychedelic space, to other human beings on their journey, doing their damnedest to find their way? How else am I going to respond? I don't know. Remember, that was number one. I don't know. So, yeah, a great deal of humility. And I wonder sometimes, it's common in psychedelic circles to talk about the disillusion of the ego, right? There's a lot of content, which is, you know, sometimes a terrifying experience, also can be a blissful experience. I think it's part of this. I think part of the dissolution of ego is just saying you don't know, right? And the humility that follows that, and not having legs to stand on. So blissful inadequacy, humility. The third is grace. Which is an old-fashioned word. We don't use it. Once upon a time in my journey, I was theologically trained for reasons that are far too complicated to explain. And I steal that word from those traditions. But grace to me is a lack of judgment, a generosity, a compassion, an understanding that comes out of humility, that you extend towards others, all others in your life. But here's the hard part, you know, towards yourself, which I really think is probably the hardest thing we do as human beings, is to extend grace towards ourselves. Psychedelics taught me so deeply, mushrooms in particular, taught me so deeply about that. Simple ways of understanding that are the arc of a life. You know, when you've lived a few decades, you begin to see that there's an arc to this thing. And I can see, oh, that's what I've been doing. Oh, wow. And you understand yourself differently than when you're at the very beginning of the journey. And you're full of piss and vinegar, and yeah, here we go, and yeah, well, which is a fantastic place to be in life, right? Just brilliant. Enjoy the hell out of that. And telling me stories, over time you'll start to see the pattern, the arc. And the other thing is the multiplicity of selves that you are. We are so many selves, and psychedelics, mushrooms teach us that in so many ways, which I'd love to go on about, but I won't. The fourth, so we've got blissful inadequacy, humility, grace, and fourthly, not surprisingly, gratitude. I think these are the four big bringbacks in terms of values. Gratitude for the journey, or whatever metaphor you prefer. Every year that I cross another one off the calendar, I am so deeply grateful that I lived this long, that I got to get to this place in my journey, that I got to unfold to here. Like, you gotta be kidding me. It's just not possible, but there it is. So gratitude for the unfolding, and then most importantly, I think, gratitude for our companions. The mushroom being one of them, but the people that you travel with, really seeing them, holding them in that space and gratitude. So I think it's a good time for question and answer. Yeah. I can't see anybody, so just yell.
What color is your underwear?
I think it's a dark blue.
Trick question.
No questions. Perfect. Yes.
So you mentioned the asshole that takes mushrooms and he's just still an asshole. Your mind is boggled by those that happen a different way.
Yeah.
And it seems that one, perhaps, value that a lot of people that I personally know have taken back from their psychedelic experiences, that this is going to work the same way on everyone. And that they're going to end up with the values that you talked about tonight. So do you have any kind of insight, perhaps, into why certain people could be resistant or aren't coming back with these values that it seems like so many people actually do?
Could everyone hear the question? So in the brief version of it is do I have any good guess why people go into psychedelic experiences as assholes and are still assholes when they come out? Right? Fair enough? So, sure, I have a theory about everything, and if I don't, give me 5 minutes, and I say that facetiously. Who knows? It's a mystery to me. I think it's that they, for whatever their reasons are, they value knowing more than not knowing, and so they go into an experience and, oh, I know what this is. Right, and I got this, and the mushroom gave me this, and ayahuasca gave me this, and so on. And then the next thing you know, they have a theory and a retreat center, and God knows what else is going on. Right? But I have to believe it's because they're deeply attached to that they got it right, and that's why I think one of the values is you gotta let that go, dude. And maybe not now. Maybe that's where you are. Can we talk in 15 years? I'd love to see where you are then. And because I think if you continue in it, maybe, although as I say that, I'm thinking of somebody who's been doing this for a long time and is still the biggest asshole. So maybe not. Never mind.
You don't know.
Yes, way back.
Hey,
You're the person blinding me.
That's me.
Okay.
You're gonna get me after. So Terrence McKenna said something of the fact that spores can be sent through outer space, like they can survive the vacuum of space.
Yeah.
Is there any? And we all understand the kind of feeling of intelligence that we get through these trips. So not me.
Right.
But anyway, is there any kind of insight that you have that maybe it's an interstellar traveler or something, the spore, the psychedelic
yeah. I don't know. Right? So, I mean, oh, I'm sorry. The question was, Dear Terrence, among the many theories he manufactured during his all too short life, was the idea that spores could travel on comets or asteroids or something and then crash on Earth. And it was a way of intelligence from somewhere else in the universe communicating to us. And so then the mushroom spores took hold and bear this alien intelligence basically from. It's, you know, that and a couple of bourbons would make me happy. I mean, I could talk with him all night about that, and it's brilliant, and I love the idea, and sure, why not? And do we know? No. And would knowing help us? No. You know, I think what helps us is to do the work and to work on that relationship, right, with the mushroom. And in a way where you don't have to be right about it and you don't have to fully understand it. I mean, that's one of the genius things about a journey in psychedelic space is you have no fucking idea where you're going. Like, you don't know. Well, where does this go? And that's just genius. So so with you know, so I don't know. Maybe there is somebody who does know. But I don't know if Terrence was right about that. But I love the idea, and who knows? Maybe he'll let us know someday.
I was just thinking, as the you know, the whole talk you're giving was so like imbued with these moral, spiritual, psychological ideas that I was just wondering the reason maybe that psychedelic mushrooms don't convey values to some users who take them is because the view that you have of these mushrooms, which is like, you know, anthropomorphic,
right,
that the plant itself really doesn't have any values to convey. It's not really a being. It's a metaphorical way of thinking about it. And maybe could you just feel that? I mean, whether there really actually is, the plant does have something to teach to everybody. I don't think it would, because it's in you, it's not in the plant.
So the question, comment, see if I can summarize this. That maybe the premise that mushrooms have anything to teach us is wrong. That they themselves don't, right? That it's us teaching ourselves through use. Is that?
Yes, that, exactly.
And then there was a preamble to that a lot of people, you suggested that we were using a lot of psychological and spiritual language.
Well, yeah, no, just, I mean, when you said that you'd studied, you know, studied at divinity school, or studied theology, that made a lot of sense to me, because it does seem that this, your psychedelic explorations here have a lot in common with the sermon that the minister would give. So I think that's pretty cool. I think you're obviously a really great minister or priest.
So now this gentleman I just met a couple nights ago is insulting me by saying I would have made a great minister. So I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So let me try to answer the question. First off, I have to say this much, right? I hope that you noticed that one of the things that I did, with the exception perhaps of the word grace, is I very carefully avoided all psychological, religious, and spiritual categories for understanding mushrooms. That was the point of the talk, right? How do we understand mushrooms on their own terms? Psychedelics on their own terms. And I gave us a list of terms that often show up, and then how do we make sense of those? I don't want to psychedelic. I don't want to psychologize psychedelics. I don't want to spiritualize psychedelics. Other people are doing that and doing important and wonderful work. I'm actually trying to start a different kind of conversation about psychedelics. And so that's in response to the preamble to the question. The response to the question, I think, is, yeah, you're right. Which is also what I'm trying to say. You know, that we don't know really what's happening. when we take plant medicines. Let's just keep ourselves there, right, and not think too much LSD or MDMA or any of the other amazing medicines that we have, but just think about that which comes from plants. I don't know, right? I know that there's intelligence in there. I know there's a crazy amount of intelligence, and I know that it seems to be able to communicate that intelligence. So that's why I don't say the mushroom gives us this, but that it's being in relationship to that intelligence, trying to participate in a conversation with it, that these values, or whatever you want to call them, begin to emerge, or at least they have for me and for others that I'm in conversation with. But I'm also aware that a lot of other stuff shows up as well. And those are the different conversations that we're having. We started by talking about this whole thing as the psychedelic circus, and we need all the people in the circus. I'm just one idiot in the corner juggling some balls. But there's a lot more interesting stuff going on. Other questions? Yes.
This is one more. This is the final question.
This is a question hopefully you can't answer.
Yay.
But MDMA chipped away at my asshole nature, and then psychedelics started to teach me things, and in response to that, I got to work waking up at 5 a.m. every day and meditating and trying to get to a place of my mushroom mind without mushrooms.
Yeah.
And today I was having an argument in the Terrence McKenna Experience Facebook group with another gentleman who was accusing condescending yogis of infiltrating the Terrence McKenna group and saying that you have to get to a place of your mushroom mind without mushrooms. And I'm wondering if you does the mushroom experience point to your human need to get to that place without the substances?
That's a great question. Roughly translated was, that to use the metaphor of being with a mushroom mind, right? And then is the goal to be in mushroom mind without the mushrooms? Or do you just take mushrooms your whole life? Or can you gain a mushroom mind that you can have without the substance itself? Is that a...
Yeah.
I think there's, I don't know how many people are on this planet, but I think there's that many answers to the question. So I think the goal, as I said, is to build, for me, it's been really obvious, the goal is to build a bridge to mushroom space or mushroom mind that I can access anytime. And MDMA, frankly, since we have people working with that in the room, was huge in helping me get there. I can be in MDMA space like that, and it just blows me away that there's a real space there, and boom, I'm in there. And so then more and more in my working with mushrooms, I think the mycelium is in my, throughout me in some weird kind of way. And yet, for me, it's an ongoing thing. So it's an important part of my journey and the work that I do. And, I don't know how long that will be true. The day may come when the mushroom and I don't do this anymore. For now, we're doing it. And the relationship keeps deepening and unfolding. And I'm learning more and it's just, you gotta be kidding me again. So as long as that, until the mushroom pats me on the ass and says, good boy, be on your way, I'm probably still, but I know others that that's not the case for. I know people that have grown, their lives have been transformed in just unbelievable ways through 4 experiences in different decades of their life. And so I think there's a lot of answers to that, but the commonality in the answers, for me at least, is the need to do that work and cultivate that relationship and let it be what it's going to be. I mean, I have friends who are deeply influential in my life. that, you know, I haven't seen in decades, and I may see them 1 or 2 more times before I die. But it doesn't change the depth of that relationship that we continue to cultivate. And then I have friends that are in my life day in, day out. So I think there's a lot of ways to play that out. I think just thinking about it, asking the question, you know, is genius. You know, what else do you need? So.
Thank you.